And we're back. Post-election, a lot of new data to go over, a lot to talk about. Mark Penn, as we always do. And this is going to be an interesting word that I'm looking forward to hearing. What's the one word that summarizes the post-election data?
Over. This election is finally over. I think it seemed like an interminable election season. We actually had two presidential races. We had endless predictions, predictor markets, people's stock going up and down every single day. We had billions upon billions of dollars spent. I think that now people can get back to their lives. The election is over.
And based upon the data that you have now and your experience, why did Trump win? Why did she lose?
Well, I said in a journal article about 10 days out from the election that Trump had the edge for the simple reason that the dynamics underlying this election never changed. People didn't think Biden did a good job. They were upset about inflation and immigration. Trump had renovated his image so that particularly after the assassination, so that he was reasonably well liked, 47% favorable rating, not like the 34% rating he had kind of in 2016, and consequently that he had was most likely to win. And those underlying dynamics of this election are really what typically determines elections. And people look at like jokes from comedians and garbage trucks and so forth, but most voters are pretty rational beings. If Biden had done what they perceived as a good job, Kamala Harris would be sitting in the White House.
Now, compare 2020 to 2024. It seemed like a lot of Democrats got off the couch and voted for Biden, but maybe against Trump. But then Biden himself and his policies weren't popular, and not enough Democrats got off the couch, but certainly enough Republicans did. Can you talk a little bit about that dynamic between the two races and how Trump, I think, ran a better campaign this time around than last time?
Well, I always thought that Trump's 2020 campaign was terrible. He had very little to say. Didn't come out with a second term agenda. There was a lot of discontent with how he handled the COVID virus, and I think they successfully ran a campaign, an anti-Trump campaign, and he was the incumbent. He was slightly below water, and he now really lost, right? But the animus of the voters, or the moving factor of the voters, and the really enormous number of voters that came out to vote for Biden, was pretty much a movement to take Trump out, and that was successful. The animus here in this election was flipped around. It was all about voters coming out to take out the Biden-Harris administration, and those voters who were all whipped up last time, they were not like waving Biden flags anymore. And the core base of Democrats got behind Harris. She depicted herself as likable, but she really wasn't able to kind of create that motivation wasn't there. In fact, that, as I tell you, the underlying dynamic was Biden did a bad job. We can't let these people continue to go.
And your polling shows that most people, as far as the job he's doing so far as president-elect, 54 to 40. Those are pretty good numbers for Trump, especially in this polarizing time. Now, it's not Barack Obama numbers, but those are not bad, right?
Yeah, I mean, look again. If you take Trump as he is a polarizing figure. He's meant to be. He's an extreme change agent, right? He's a meteor hitting the political system that it never expected, and certainly, I think whatever the betting markets would have been 2 years ago, I think I'd be collecting 10 or 15 to 1, right? In terms of him coming back, basically pasting all the Republican candidates who were well funded and then running two presidential races, after being convicted of 37 felonies, nearly assassinated, uh, and dishing fries at McDonald's. So I think that it was not preordained. It was not an entirely predictable event, but certain things have kind of welled themselves up here over time, which is working and middle class voters have a lot of discontent with what they saw as progressive elite policies of the Biden administration. The Biden administration came in with pro climate change, pro racial equity, pro DEI, pro trans, all of those agendas. And your average working person wanted lower cost, lower gas, lower food costs, right? And they didn't feel like they were listened to. And consequently, to me, the most interesting thing is that the Republican Party got everyone between 30,000 and 100,000 of income. The Democrats got the over 100,000 who are in the progressive elite land and who don't care so much about the cost of eggs or
Uh-huh.
gasoline. In the under 30,000 crowd who really care about government subsidies. And so that coalition of the over 100 and under 30 was defeated by the working and middle class coalition of voters who said, no, 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 it's about the price of eggs, guys.
You mentioned in 2020 was kind of an anti-Trump movement, and there was COVID going on. Trump did not run a great campaign. Then we fast forward to the midterms, and Democrats did better than anticipated, really um, highlighting the abortion issue. And kind of what they ran, I think, this time around was a combination of that. Another anti-Trump campaign, and also leaning into abortion. But the top issues are, as your new polling shows, inflation, immigration, and the economy. Did Democrats run a campaign, kind of an old campaign, and Trump obviously shifted and ran a better campaign? What do you think of the tactics of the Democratic plan that didn't work?
Well, I think in many ways they both went to what has worked for them in the past. And I think Democrats sort of got right. I mean, I think the Democrats had the message that, hey, let's just dump on Trump and pick up women and pick up young voters and solidify our base with African Americans. I think they have been really doing a poor job with the Latino community, which is really a working class community. It's not necessarily a racial community, right? And they treat it like it's a racial community, but it's not. It's a working class community of people who care about their families and their paychecks. So I think they had a strategic approach. It was based on what worked in the past, and Trump ran a better campaign. He was better. He had a much higher favorable rating. He assembled a cast of supporters of Elon Musk and RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, and he was no longer just Trump alone out there. He was calmer. He sat for 3 hour personal type interviews, and then the remember a lot of the language was to demonize him, right? The New York people convicted him of 37 kind of felonies and ridiculous cases. I mean, and and I think his reaction, as we saw in our polling, his reaction to the assassination really did make an impression upon people. That wow, this guy to get up and say fight, fight, fight while almost being killed moments later is not something an average person is likely to be able to do. So I think there are still a lot of elements here floating around.
Well, it's interesting, like, when the cycle started, obviously, Democrats have most celebrities and actors in Hollywood and in their back pocket, but the biggest endorsements, according to your, data, was Joe Rogan and Elon Musk, especially Musk. Talk about that a little bit. I mean, because Musk not only endorsed him, but obviously was talking about him on Twitter, X now, all the time, and also was giving cash giveaways and giving Trump money. I mean, that was I'm not surprised your polling shows that he was the most valuable endorsement because he was very valuable.
Well, but I think Musk is connected to the substance of creating and innovating.
Uh-huh.
And Taylor Swift is connected to music and the various Beyonce and Oprah, they're not really connected to the things that fundamentally could change society, technology, and innovation. And so I think Musk was more powerful than people realized as an endorsement. And RFK was also better liked, I think, than people realized. And his message about purity of drugs and food is not a wacky message. It's more of a welcome message than a wacky one.
You mentioned Latino voters, and you had mentioned this pre-election too. That you had highlighted that the data was showing that that African Americans were largely coming home. Obviously, she had some problem on the male side of that, but the Latino vote was not, and it certainly did not come in like Democrats hoped for. Uh, why is that? Obviously, the economy, and you mentioned inflation the last time pre-election. Inflation is important to everybody, but it's very, very important to Latinos. And how do Democrats get that more of that vote back? Because Trump really cut into it.
Yeah, well, I think Democrats have to come back and understand housing, food, transportation, and a job market that isn't filled with uh, filled with people who are here who came across the border, and neighborhoods that don't have crime. That those are classic working and middle class issues that people care passionately about and affect the ability to bring up them to kind of their own lifestyle and that of their family. And that's not true of climate change. Uh, Abortion is an important issue for many women, but it's not a kitchen table issue either. And certainly she won that issue, although, the more time passes here, kind of the less powerful that issue is, because all the major states really haven't changed their abortion policy at all. And the number of referendums, even in Kansas, that struck down, extreme measures, got defeated. So it's a little less salient, I think, than they were expecting. But um, but when you look at where Democrats wanted to spend their money, which is on kind of one time or kind of almost giveaways that are not connected to work, innovation, or responsibility, right? And then on the other hand, policies like DEI and climate change, they just don't connect with working and middle class voters. So either the Democrat Party is going to say, "Hey, we're not the working and middle class party anymore," or they're going to have to come back to earth on these issues, because Trump swooped in and captured those important issues. And you can't appeal to the Latino community as a Latino community. They are a working class community, concerned about their families, and they're trying to, you look at the tremendous growth of Latinos, they're trying to establish themselves as the newest large scale immigrant group. And usually that group is about how you make it in America. Okay. And that means they want the opportunity to do that. And they did not see even her quote opportunity economy is really playing with them.
You had an interesting question on when people decided on how to vote. And of course, down the stretch, the media gets very excited when there's a bad Puerto Rico joke down the stretch of the last election. But 9% said they decided on the day of the election. Another 9% said the week of. But when do you think really when basically this was baked in that Trump was going to win? When do you think it was really decided?
I think really 2 weeks out. I think when I wrote the article, basically that then on in, unless something fundamental happened, that the dynamics of this race, she had not been able to tackle the basic issues of how you separate from Biden, and what she really stood for. And he had hit, in my view, he always overhit immigration compared to the economy, but he successfully made that, a very important issue, and he had improved his personal profile well enough to get elected. But there's one other factor here about deciding to vote that to me was very decisive, and that was the pattern of mail-in voter. That the last few elections, the Democrats dominated the early vote 2-1. And I've been kind of a broken record. It's very hard to explain, but there's a math to this. If I have a vote that's if let's say there are 100 voters and 50 of them vote by mail, then that's 50 votes that are in the bank. And if 50 are supposed to show up at the polls, that's only 45 votes. If there's 5 of them will have their car break down, their kid gets sick, there's some emergency at work on that particular day. And so the fact that when that happened, 2/3 of that 10% would be Republicans was costing them 2% of the vote. And that wasn't chicanery, it wasn't thievery, it wasn't miscounting, it was math. Okay. And they finally figured out that math and they really closed the gap on mail in voting. And I think that was worth at least half of the margin here.
In your questions, you always ask about individual people, policymakers, lawmakers, presidential candidates. And out of all the people you asked about, Matt Gaetz got the worst approval rating, basically 12 points underwater. Now is the nominee for the Department of Justice, has quit the House, obviously controversial figure. The House Ethics Committee was investigating. The Senate, or at least some senators, want to see what's in that investigation that has not been released. What do you think his chances of getting through the Senate are?
I think they're 1 in 3.
Okay.
Uh, I think I think he resigned the day he resigned because he had to. And I don't think this report, you know, some report on the ethics of your being with, young women is just never going to be. There's no way this was going to be a good report for him.
No,
And
no.
so I think he knew that the investigation is over, but I think the Senate is going to press. If he moves on here, the Senate is going to press for the results of that investigation. I don't think that they're going to be able to confirm someone without seeing that investigation. And then once anybody sees it, it will be leaked. So if he can survive that, then he can get, then he can, and it turns out the charges are false, and that's what they're going to conclude. But it's pretty unlikely that he jettisoned the day before the report was going to come out because it was a good report. So I put it at 1 in 3.
Another unpopular figure on the other side of the aisle, Hunter Biden. 75% of people say don't pardon Hunter. Now, interestingly, down the stretch of the election, didn't get that much attention, but Trump did not. He kept the possibility of pardoning Hunter Biden on the table in an interview with Hugh Hewitt. Though I contend he may not have had an opportunity, because I think, even though the White House keeps saying it, that they're not going to pardon or commute his sentence, that I think Joe Biden's going to do it. But and then there's some people think, well, maybe Joe Biden should pardon Trump and Hunter Biden just to move on as a country. What's your take on all that?
If I were, well, it seems like Trump is not going to need a pardon because Jack Smith's just going to go out of business and pull anything anyway. But I suppose Biden, as a last gesture and kind of make a big deal of national unity, could do that. And his better move would be for him to pardon Trump and him to get Trump to, like, what did they really talk about for 2 hours there? Okay?
Right. Well, they met this week, yeah.
Why do you think he was smiling at Trump all of a sudden? Like, the best outcome is for a cross agreement. I pardon Trump, Trump pardons Hunter. Right?
Interesting.
That
Interesting.
is, and I don't think you heard that here first.
Yes, that's good.
So I think you should seriously consider it. I think, and I'd agree with you, probably 60-40 come the evening of January 19th. There will be a drafted pardon of Hunter Biden, and Joe Biden is going to be sitting there, sign it, don't sign it. And it's going to be very hard for him not to sign it because he loves his son.
Absolutely. And that's what I think it comes down to. And it's an interesting theory. Of course, Biden would have to trust Trump. So we'll see if that happens. But that would be fascinating. In the Trump area, you can never discount anything happening. That's for sure. Last topic I want to talk about is media. Very interesting findings. 3 and 5 said that the coverage of the election was fair, but that most, certainly 6 out of 10, think basically journalists are playing an advocacy role. And I think this was another bad election for the media and pundits. What was your takeaway from those numbers?
My takeaway from the numbers: if the media wants just Democrats listening to them, they have that, and it really is fundamentally Republicans who think that they're not treated fairly by the media, by
Right.
what you would call the mainstream media. And if you want those folks back, then that means you're going to have to change the way you cover them and the way you cover the topics that they care about. And just for example, the way Fox News covered immigration is just radically different from the way that the other networks covered immigration. And if they would go back and look at something like that as an issue, were they not doing it because they knew Trump, that was his issue? What was it that that would take an issue like that, and were they biased? So they're going to have to decide. As I always point out, if you want an image where you're liked by 80% of the country, you're going to have to be liked by Democrats and Republicans. If you're happy with 40 or 50%, then you just choose one, not the other. The Hill is pretty bipartisan.
Yeah. Oh, listen, the studies do show that. And honestly,
You-
though, I didn't think there was a bias in the media until I was in the media, and there is definitely a leftward bias. There's no doubt about it. Oh yeah. Do you think the media
and
will treat Trump differently in the second term?
Well, we're waiting to find out who his press secretary is going to be, and whether or
Sure.
not they're going to have press briefings, and whether or not that's going to come back or not. It does seem to me that having won the national popular vote and the electoral college, and won the second term, they're going to have to treat him a little bit more like they treat typical presidents. And whether or not that happens, I think that the tone and the nature of it was so adversarial. And remember, last time this whole thing kicked off with Trump-Russia investigations, he was under a cloud. The Democrats were doing their best to disrupt the administration and to basically, internally screw it up as much as they can. FBI was pulling tricks with General Flynn. I don't see a lot of any of those things happening now. Trump, whether the Democrats like it or not, Trump is a lot smarter now about how government works.
Yes.
And he is moving very quickly to actually take control of the government, because the last election, the government was really in control of him, more or less. And he never really was able to gain that control. He couldn't get the appointments done. He didn't even have people, frankly, who would serve. And now he's got like a list of people around the block. So I think it's a smarter, savvier, more prepared crew. And that means the press is also going to have to take, I think, a fundamentally different attitude. They're not going to be able to write every story, 89% negative Trump.
Right. Yet, and I agree with you that Trump knows the DC rules. He's a New York guy. When he came down to DC, he didn't understand the DC government rules. He didn't fully understand his actually pardon power. Now he knows all the rules, and that makes him more dangerous. And that's why they're hitting the ground running, especially compared to last time.
Yep.
So,
but he can't run again, so that also makes a big difference.
yes, it does. And this will be an interesting 4 years. Well, Mark, it's been great. It's been was a hell of a week, election week, and now we look at the aftermath and as Democrats try to pick up the pieces, some interesting stuff. Look forward to talking to you next month.
Thank you, Bob.